He thought the desert had nothing left to take from him until the ground split open beneath his feet. When former Navy SEAL Cole Bennett was dragged away from a collapsing shed by his German shepherd, Ranger, he never imagined the quake had unearthed a Cold War bunker buried for 60 years. Inside lay letters from a Marine who never came home, and a deed to the last untouched water source in a dying valley. But uncovering the truth awakened powerful enemies. The bank trying to seize a struggling orchard, the state officials determined to bury the past, and a family shattered by decades of loss. As Cole fought to protect the rightful heirs, he also faced the hardest battle of all, reaching out to the daughter who had walked away from him long ago. This is a story of hidden sacrifices, second chances, and a bond between a man and his dog that refused to break. If you're ready for the full journey, follow the channel and comment where you're listening from, or simply write Amen to bless everyone hearing this story today. The desert noon sat heavy on Yucca Valley, a kind of heat that didn't just press against the skin. It crawled inside the bones. Cole Bennett wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of a calloused hand, the gesture slow and habitual. At nearly 70, Cole moved with the deliberate steadiness of a man whose body had endured far more than most landscapes. His frame was tall, rugged, the broad shoulders and thick forearms of a former Navy SEAL who had never learned how to take life easily. Deep lines carved across his sun-toughened face, the marks of years spent under foreign suns and even harsher memories. His beard, gray with streaks of white, grew rough along a jaw still sharp despite age. He had the look of a man built to weather storms, yet carrying one inside him. Around him stretched acres of sand, brittle shrubs, and the occasional Joshua tree, twisted like something half alive and half cursed. His little house, an old single-story structure with peeling paint, stood behind him, the one constant in a life marked by deployments, goodbyes, and eventually a silence he had brought upon himself. The silence of his daughter, Megan Bennett, who stopped answering his calls years ago. That was the only thing the desert heat couldn't dry out. Beside Cole trotted the only companion he trusted without hesitation. Ranger, a 6-year-old German shepherd with a powerful frame, silver sable coat, and sharp amber eyes. Ranger had the muscled chest and alert posture of a working dog, every movement precise, purposeful. But beneath the discipline was a gentleness that surfaced only for Cole, a bond forged from long hikes, long nights, and the quiet companionship of two creatures with more scars than they let on. Ranger's ears twitched constantly, scanning the world the way Cole once taught younger SEALs to do. Cole bent down to adjust a loose hinge on the side of the old shed that sat at the edge of his property. The structure had been there long before he bought the land. Sun-bleached boards, rusted nails, metal roofing barely holding on. Inside lay years of abandoned tools, broken pots, and forgotten items left by previous owners. He always meant to tear it down, but like many things in his life, he kept postponing it. "Should have done this 20 years ago," he muttered, tightening a screw with a grunt. Ranger lay in the narrow strip of shade nearby, panting softly. But something in the dog's posture shifted. His ears shot upward. His muscles tightened. His breathing stopped mid-pant. "What is it, boy?" Cole asked, straightening. Ranger rose, fur along his spine lifting. He took 3 slow steps toward the shed, his gaze locked on the ground beneath it. Then a low growl rumbled from deep in his chest, nothing like his usual warning bark at coyotes. This one was raw, urgent. Cole frowned. Ranger didn't spook easily. The dog was steady as bedrock, even during the wildfires last year when ash fell like snow. If Ranger growled, something was wrong. Cole took one step toward the shed. Ranger lunged. The German shepherd clamped gently but firmly onto the cuff of Cole's faded work jeans and jerked backwards with surprising force. Cole stumbled. "Hey, Ranger, what the hell are you doing?" Cole barked. But the dog didn't release. His eyes, wide, fearful, locked onto Cole's, begging him to move. Ranger tugged again, harder, nearly pulling Cole off balance. Cole's instincts flared. The last time he saw fear like that in another creature's eyes was in Fallujah, inside a collapsing building with a trapped Marine. Ranger was terrified, but not for himself. All right, Cole relented, stepping back several feet. Ranger let go, retreating a few paces, but staying between Cole and the shed. The dog's tail tucked low, his breaths came sharp and fast. A stillness settled across the desert, too still. No cicadas buzzed, no distant hum of traffic. Cole's skin prickled, the air turning unnaturally heavy, thick as if the desert itself was holding its breath. Then the ground moaned. It was not a sound, but a vibration in the teeth, a deep underground grinding that made Cole's vision shake. A lifetime of combat reflexes kicked in, knees bent, muscles coiled, but even a seal couldn't brace against the earth itself. The earthquake hit like a freight train. The hard-packed dirt rippled beneath him. The air filled with a sickening chorus of snapping wood, groaning metal, and a roar that sounded like the desert was splitting in half. Cole dropped to his hands and knees as the shed shuddered violently, its metal roof twisting like a wounded animal. "Get back!" Cole yelled, even though Ranger was already sprinting toward the open land, looking back only to ensure Cole followed. Cole crawled backward as the quake intensified. The shed's old foundation, little more than a crude concrete slab, buckled and cracked. Nails ripped free from beams. Wooden walls collapsed inward in a violent implosion of dust, splinters, and rusted tin. The structure fell exactly where Cole had been standing seconds earlier. If Ranger hadn't pulled him, he didn't finish the thought. After what felt like minutes, but was likely only seconds, the ground stilled. A haze of red desert dust drifted around him like smoke. Cole coughed, pushing himself upright, his heart pounding against his ribs with the thud of an old war drum. "Ranger!" he called. Out of the rolling dust came the dog's silhouette, ears up, tail low, pacing anxiously until he reached Cole's side. Ranger pressed his head against Cole's shoulder, whining softly. "Good boy," Cole whispered, his hand sinking into Ranger's thick fur. "You saved my damn life." When the dust settled enough for him to see, Cole turned to the wreckage. The shed was gone, reduced to a pile of twisted metal and shattered timber. But something else gleamed beneath the debris. At the center of the cracked concrete slab, where the earthquake had split it wide open, lay a shape that didn't belong to the desert. A large, rust-coated steel surface, curved and thick like the back of a giant metal beast. A hinge protruded from the fractured earth, industrial, heavy, built to withstand pressure. It wasn't a septic tank. It wasn't piping. It wasn't anything he recognized from civilian life. But as someone who had spent years navigating hidden compartments, weapons caches, and underground structures overseas, Cole knew a hatch when he saw one. A big one. Ranger approached the exposed metal cautiously, sniffing at the seams. His growl returned, low, uneasy, but not panicked this time. More like he sensed history rather than danger. Cole stared at the hatch, the desert sun glaring off rusted steel. The shed hadn't just collapsed. It had uncovered something deliberately buried. Something built to stay hidden. Something from a different era. Cole felt a slow, familiar tightening in his gut. The instinct that once kept him alive through ambushes and night raids. It wasn't fear. It was awareness. Whatever lay beneath his property wasn't a bomb. It was a secret. And the desert had just chosen this day to reveal it. The hatch looked even larger once Cole cleared away the splintered boards and twisted metal. Rust flaked off in brittle curls each time he touched the surface, and the hinge, thick as a man's wrist, seemed fused to the cracked slab by 60 years of desert heat. Ranger circled the perimeter with cautious steps, tail low, nose twitching as though the hatch exhaled an ancient breath he didn't trust. Cole placed a palm on the steel, feeling its unnatural chill beneath the noon sun. He'd breached compounds in Afghanistan, pried open collapsed structures in Iraq, but never expected to find something like this buried in his own backyard. "All right, old man," he muttered to himself. "Let's see what you're hiding." He climbed into his pickup, a battered Ford with faded blue paint and a heavy-duty winch strapped to the front bumper. The truck was as worn as he was, but like him, it still had enough fight left. Cole backed the vehicle into place, gravel crunching under the tires. His movements were practiced, methodical, the kind of muscle memory only years of SEAL operations could carve into a man. Ranger watched from a distance, amber eyes locked on his partner, as though tracking every choice, ready for anything. Cole hooked the winch cable to the recessed iron ring embedded in the hatch. The ring was surprisingly intact, stiff but still functional. He tightened the line, stepping back to test the tension. It held. He climbed into the truck's cab and engaged the winch. The cable tightened, humming like a strained guitar string, vibrating with the stubborn weight of time itself. For a moment, nothing moved. Then, with a groan that sounded like metal remembering how to breathe, the hatch shifted. Rust cracked apart. Concrete crumbled. Ranger barked sharply as the hatch tore free of the earth with a violent snap and swung upward, slamming against a mound of collapsed debris. A hollow darkness yawned beneath. Cole shut off the engine and walked to the opening. The desert wind couldn't reach down into that throat of black, and the stale air rising from the hole smelled like dust, machine oil, and forgotten years. He retrieved his flashlight and knelt beside the edge. "Stay back, Ranger," he said quietly. But the German shepherd didn't retreat far, planting himself at Cole's shoulder, determined to watch every second. Cole descended the narrow concrete staircase, the walls cool beneath his fingertips. Each step carried a faint echo, the sound bouncing off buried walls as if the bunker were waking up after a long sleep. At the bottom stood a blast door, thick steel, industrial, slightly ajar. Cole nudged it open with a cautious push. What his light revealed stole the breath from his lungs. The bunker was intact, sealed away like a time capsule. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with canned goods whose labels faded into muted pastels. A wool blanket lay folded on a metal cot. A laminated map of Yucca Valley hung beside a locker. The calendar on the table, yellowed, dusty, displayed one date, October 22nd, 1962, the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis, the day the world nearly burned. Cole moved carefully, scanning the room with both a soldier's suspicion and a man's quiet awe. On the table sat a wristwatch with a cracked leather strap, its hands locked forever at 5:17. He had seen watches like this in old SEAL training films. Simple, rugged, meant for the field. Someone had taken it off deliberately. Ranger descended the stairs behind him, nails clicking softly, nose flaring with curiosity. He wasn't afraid, but he stayed pressed close against Cole's leg, a living shadow. On the far corner of the table lay a steel ammunition can, olive drab, the paint chipped but surprisingly preserved. It was heavier than it looked when Cole lifted it, thick with the weight of something important. He unlatched the top, the metal snapping open with a gasp of stale air. Inside, wrapped in a protective sleeve, was an official document, a deed granting perpetual groundwater rights spanning a vast swath beneath Yucca Valley. Cole scanned the page twice, eyebrows drawing down. This is worth more than the whole damn valley, he whispered. Why would someone hide this? Beneath the deed lay a bundle of letters tied with twine, the envelopes brittle at the corners. The handwriting on the front, though faded, belonged to a steady hand. To my dearest Alice and our little Emily. Cole closed the can slowly. Whatever story had started here was not just history, it was personal. By late afternoon, Cole drove the documents to the VFW post 10 miles away. The Veterans of Foreign Wars building was a modest, sand-colored box, with a sun-bleached flag hanging stubbornly above the doorway. Inside, the air was cool, tinged with coffee, old wood, and the residue of decades of cigarette smoke. Behind the bar stood Ray Alvarez, a former Army medic in his late 50s, thick-bodied with close-cropped salt-and-pepper hair and a permanent 5 o'clock shadow. His brown eyes held equal measures of weariness and humor, the kind of man who had patched up broken soldiers overseas and now patched up broken conversations over cheap whiskey. "Well, damn, Cole Bennett," Ray said, resting a forearm scarred from an IED blast. "Haven't seen you in a month. You bring trouble or stories?" "Both," Cole replied, placing the ammo can on the counter. Ray raised an eyebrow. "Looks Cold War." "It is," Cole said. "And I need someone who knows records." Ray's gaze softened. "I know a guy." He disappeared into the back to place a call. Minutes later, the door swung open and a man stepped in. A tall, lean figure in his late 30s, with sandy hair combed neatly to the side. His clothes, button-down shirt tucked into pressed slacks, seemed too formal for the VFW's dim interior. But the way he carried himself told another story. Darren Collins, Ray, introduced him. Worked for the local bank, but served 2 tours in Iraq as a logistics officer. His face was youthful, but the creases around his eyes, etched by sandstorms and sleepless nights, betrayed experience far older. "Ray says you've got something interesting," Darren said, with a handshake firm and respectful. Cole studied him. Darren had a calm, almost meticulous demeanor, the kind of man who double-checked every line on a form and every detail on a mission plan. But beneath the neat exterior was an unmistakable tension, a man torn between duty to a civilian job and the moral compass forged in combat. Cole opened the ammo can. Darren's eyes widened as he scanned the deed and the letters. "Where the hell did this come from?" "Buried under my shed," Cole answered. Darren exhaled. "Thomas Hale, Marine Corps Corporal. I remember hearing about Hale when I was digging through old local archives. Give me 24 hours. I'll run this through some contacts." True to his word, Darren returned the next evening, shoulders heavy with what he had learned. "Thomas Hale was deployed to Vietnam late '62, he said quietly. "Killed in action November '63. His wife, Alice, died 5 years later. Their daughter, Emily Hale, is still alive." Cole felt a tightening in his chest. Darren continued. "Name's Emily Carter now. Lives in Ojai Valley on a small citrus farm. And Cole, Her property is in foreclosure. His voice dipped lower. My bank is the one foreclosing. For a moment, the room stilled. The bunker, the water rights, the letters written to save a family. And now, a daughter on the brink of losing everything. Cole looked down at the deed, fingers curling around the paper. Ranger pressed against his leg, sensing the shift. Ray crossed his arms, watching Darren with a hard stare. What are you going to do about it? Darren swallowed. I don't know yet. But Cole did. We're going to Ojai, he said. The words came out steady as steel, and as he spoke them, the ground beneath the story shifted, just like the desert floor, opening a path toward a secret that was no longer buried, but unfinished. The chapter ends here, right at the moment when everything is about to change. The drive from Yucca Valley to Ojai felt like moving between two different Americas. The desert fell away behind them, replaced by winding roads that cut through foothills dotted with oak trees struggling against years of drought. Cole Bennett kept both hands on the wheel, his posture rigid, jaw tight beneath the coarse gray beard that framed his weathered face. Ranger sat upright in the passenger seat, the German shepherd's muscular body braced with the alertness of a working dog who sensed the weight of his handler's silence. Ranger's coat shimmered gold and silver in the afternoon sun, drifting through the cracked window, and his amber eyes darted toward each passing sound, each shift in terrain. As Route 66 gave way to the narrow rural roads of Ojai Valley, the landscape unfolded into what once must have been a thriving sea of green. Now the orchards looked like aging skeletons, rows of citrus trees with curled leaves and brittle branches, their fruit shriveled or absent. The irrigation ditches running parallel to the dirt road were nothing more than long scars of cracked mud. Cole slowed the truck as he approached a fading wooden sign. Carter Family Orchard, the paint chipped and peeling, a ghost of the farm's former pride. Cole parked near the gate, dust billowing behind him. He stepped out, stretching sore knees that had known too many jumps from helicopters, too many years of punishment. Ranger hopped down beside him, sniffing the dry air, tail stiff with curiosity. The farmhouse at the center of the orchard was small, worn, and coated in a thin layer of dust. The wooden porch sagged at the edges. A single pink foreclosure notice flapped on the door, its paper crisp from sun exposure. Before Cole could knock, the door swung open and a woman stepped out. Emily Carter was in her early 60s, though life had carved deeper years into her posture. She was tall and lean, with a once strong frame now thinned by worry. Her hair, silver streaked with remnants of dark brown, was pulled back into a loose bun at the nape of her neck. The sun had given her skin a tough, weathered texture, and fine wrinkles gathered beneath her eyes that were a penetrating shade of blue-gray and carried a lifetime of disappointment. She held herself like someone waiting for the next blow rather than someone hoping for mercy. "We're not taking visitors," she said sharply. Her voice was rough but carried a strength that hadn't yet been broken. She narrowed her eyes at Cole's truck, taking in the dusty plates, then scanned his broad shoulders and military posture. Suspicion hardened her tone. "Let me guess. You're here from the bank. You can turn right around and leave." Cole opened his mouth to speak, but Ranger moved first. The German shepherd trotted past Emily, ignoring her protests, and walked onto the porch where a man sat silently in a wheelchair. He was thin, frail, with sunken cheeks and a graying beard neatly trimmed along a narrow jawline. His eyes, soft brown but distant, stared into nothing, the emptiness of someone whose mind had dimmed since a devastating stroke. His name, Cole would soon learn, was Mark Carter. Ranger approached with gentle steps, tail lowered in respect. When he reached Mark, the dog rested his head in the man's lap with a motion so tender that it startled both Cole and Emily. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Mark's fingers twitched. His hand, once limp and still, lifted slightly and brushed Ranger's fur. A faint smile, crooked, barely formed, touched the corners of his mouth. Emily froze. Years of grief and exhaustion cracked for an instant, replaced by something more fragile: hope. A high-pitched laugh erupted as a little girl burst out the front door. She couldn't have been older than 7. Her hair was a cascade of curly red-gold strands, tied messily with a purple ribbon. Her skin was pale and freckled, her cheeks rosy from playing in the sun. Her name was Lucy Carter, and she carried with her an energy that didn't match the sorrow resting over the orchard. "Mom, there's a dog!" Lucy shouted joyfully as she flung her arms wide and threw herself toward Ranger. "Lucy!" Emily reached out instinctively, but Ranger gently nudged his head into the girl's chest, sending her into a fit of giggles. The dog licked her cheek once, causing the little girl to squeal. Cole removed his hat and held it respectfully against his chest. "Ma'am," he began, "I'm not from the bank. My name is Cole Bennett. I found something. Something that belongs to you." Emily's expression transformed from suspicion to confusion to guarded caution. She studied him more closely. His steady gaze, the disciplined tension in his stance, the scars along his forearms. She recognized the quiet aura of a man shaped by service. It didn't soften her entirely, but it shifted something. Inside the kitchen, a warm but dim space with worn linoleum floors and mismatched chairs, Cole placed the steel ammunition box on the table. Emily stood stiffly, arms crossed over her chest, while Lucy peeked out from behind her legs. Cole opened the box and gently set the deed and the bundle of letters on the table, along with the old wristwatch, whose frozen hands still read 517. "This was buried under my property," he said. "Your father, Corporal Thomas Hale, wrote these." The name hit Emily like a strike to the ribs. Her breath hitched. Her posture weakened, though she didn't sit. "My father left us," she said quietly, voice brittle. "He never came back." Cole shook his head. "He didn't abandon you. He prepared everything to keep your family safe. He built that bunker, bought water rights that would still be valid today, and he meant for all of this to reach you." Emily hesitated, then picked up the top letter. The paper trembled in her hands. She opened it with reverence, as though afraid the ink might fade if she breathed too hard. When she read the line, "Tell Emily her daddy loves her more than the whole sky," her face crumpled. The steel armor she had carried for decades shattered, and tears slid down her cheeks. Mark's wheelchair squeaked softly as he shifted, watching her with faint recognition. Before Cole could say anything more, a truck door slammed outside. Emily stiffened again. Darren Collins stepped onto the porch, holding a clipboard and wearing a clean button-down shirt tucked into charcoal pants. He looked every bit the professional banking agent sent to deliver foreclosure paperwork. But up close, the details softened him. Light stubble along his jaw, sandy blonde hair neatly parted but wind-tousled from the drive. Blue eyes that seemed too empathetic for the job he'd been assigned. His stance was tense, as though every step toward the door chipped at a moral boundary inside him. He paused when he saw Cole. Then he saw Emily's tear-streaked face. And finally, he noticed the letters and the deed on the table. Darren's shoulders dropped. His clipboard lowered to his side. Something inside him wavered. Cole met his eyes. "You came to deliver that notice?" Darren swallowed hard. "I was supposed to." His gaze drifted toward the old watch ticking faintly now that Cole had wound it. "I didn't know the whole story." Emily wiped her eyes but didn't step away. "Are you here to take my home?" Darren shook his head. "Not today," he said, voice low. "Maybe not ever. This changes things." He stepped inside, closing the screen door behind him. "Emily," he said gently, "I think we should talk. And I think your father intended for this to save your family. Let me help you make sure it does." Before Emily could respond, Ranger barked sharply, once, urgent. Everyone turned. Through the kitchen window, at the far edge of the orchard, a black SUV was slowly making its way up the dirt road. Dust curled behind it in a thick cloud. Darren's face paled. "That's the regional director," he whispered. "If he finds out what you have before we file anything, he'll shut this down." Cole stepped forward, jaw tightening, Ranger at his side with fur rising along his spine. The SUV rolled to a stop. The engine cut off. The door began to open, and everything poised on the edge of unraveling. The regional director's black SUV sat like a threat at the edge of the orchard, idling in a slow rumble that vibrated across the dry soil. Cole stood at the window beside Ranger, the German shepherd's fur raised in a silent warning. But after several tense seconds, the engine cut off and the vehicle turned around, disappearing back down the dusty road without a single door opening. The threat wasn't gone. It was merely delayed. Darren let out a shaky breath, his shoulders sinking in relief and dread all at once. "They'll be back," he muttered, "which means we need to move fast." Over the next 3 days, the orchard became a battlefield of paperwork, negotiations, and clashing loyalties. The farmhouse kitchen, once a quiet, weather-beaten space, transformed into a war room. The table was covered with documents, maps of old aquifers, legal codes, historical land deeds, and half-empty mugs of coffee. Phones vibrated constantly, pens scratched across forms, and Ranger lay at Cole's feet like a sentry, his ears rising at every unfamiliar voice. Darren Collins worked with a fervor that surprised even him. Without his neatly pressed shirt and corporate posture, he seemed younger, more agile. The clean lines of his face set into a hardened focus, revealing a man shaped by two worlds, banking ledgers and battlefield memories. The sandy blonde hair that he kept meticulously combed began to fall loose from running his hands through it in frustration. His jaw tightened whenever the bank's regional office called demanding explanations. Darren wasn't defiant by nature. He was someone who followed rules until those rules hurt the wrong people. Iraq had taught him that. And now, Emily's orchard was teaching him again. To strengthen their case, Darren brought in Linda Moreno, a water rights attorney in her early 50s with a sharp intelligence that radiated from her dark, steady eyes. She had the bearing of a woman who'd spent her life squaring off against corporations 10 times her size. Short black hair streaked with silver framed her angular face, and she wore practical suits that traded elegance for efficiency. Her voice was measured, calm, and she had a habit of tapping a fountain pen against the table when thinking. She studied the deed and letters with intense concentration. "This isn't just valid," she said finally. "It's ironclad. If we prove continuity of ownership, Emily's family legally controls a water source that companies have been trying to monopolize for decades. Emily, standing near the stove with her hands wrapped around a chipped mug, let the words settle into her bones. She had spent years holding her world together with exhaustion and sheer will. Her tall, narrow frame carried too many burdens, her blue-gray eyes often dimmed by sorrow. But now something flickered behind them, something old but not dead. Hope. While legal storms brewed at the kitchen table, quieter moments unfolded around the orchard. In the living room, Mark Carter, still thin and frail in his wheelchair, watched baseball on the muted television. His once strong hands, now weakened by a stroke, rested on the chair arms, occasionally twitching when a familiar team logo appeared. Cole sat beside him, silent but present, nursing a cup of black coffee. Though Mark rarely spoke, there was a subtle camaraderie between the two veterans, a shared understanding formed not from words, but from the quiet between them. Lucy, with her cascade of messy red-gold curls, often sprawled across the floor drawing pictures of Ranger. The little girl's freckled cheeks scrunched with concentration as she captured every detail: the pointed ears, the proud stance, the wise amber eyes. Ranger accepted the attention with the dignified patience of a guardian who finally understood his purpose here. And Emily, in rare moments of solitude, reread her father's letters. Every word softened the rigid armor she had worn for decades. Her father hadn't abandoned her. He had fought for her future the only way he knew how. In the kitchen doorway, Cole sometimes watched her, a quiet ache forming in his chest. Her healing reminded him of the wound he still carried, his estrangement from Megan. The legal fight intensified. Calls came in from water authorities, city officials, and increasingly hostile bank executives. Darren fielded each one with a calm voice that belied his racing heartbeat. Linda arranged a meeting with a state reviewer specializing in historic water claims. The regional director attempted to push back, but the law was no longer entirely in his favor. One evening, after the house had fallen into a rare stretch of quiet, Cole stepped outside into the cool twilight. Ranger followed, sitting at his heel as they both looked over the valley. The orchard was still suffering, its leaves curled with thirst. But with the water rights, there was a future again, one where life could return. But Cole's thoughts weren't on the orchard. They were on his daughter. Megan Bennett haunted him more than any battlefield ghost. He remembered her as a young girl with auburn hair, bright eyes, and a fierce spirit, always waiting at the door when he came home between deployments. But as the years passed and he missed birthdays, school plays, scraped knees, and whispered fears, something inside her hardened. The last argument had been a blow that Cole carried ever since. She had said he was a father in name only, and then she stopped answering his calls. He couldn't rebuild Emily's bond with her father and ignore the broken pieces of his own. The next morning, after reviewing documents with Linda and Darren, Cole quietly slipped out. He took the long coastal drive along Highway 1, letting the roar of the Pacific steady his breathing. Ranger sat in the passenger seat, head out the window, ears flapping in the wind. Cole pulled over at a scenic overlook. Waves crashed below, sending mist into the air. The sun dipped low, casting the ocean in molten gold. He stood with his elbows on the guardrail, phone in hand, thumb hovering over Megan's number. He had faced enemy fire, collapsing buildings, and darkness beneath foreign sands. But nothing terrified him like this call. Ranger nudged his hand gently with his nose, as though reminding him that courage didn't vanish with age. Cole drew a deep breath and pressed the button, The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. His chest tightened with each second of silence. Then a voice answered. "Dad?" His breath hitched. Her voice was older, steadier, but he could still hear the little girl inside the woman she'd become. "Megan," he said, voice unsteady. I'm sorry. For all of it. I should have been there. I want to fix this. If you'll let me." A long silence stretched across the line. He imagined her standing in her kitchen somewhere on the East Coast, arms folded, wrestling with every old wound he had caused. "You have a grandson," she finally said, voice cracking. "His name is Owen. I don't want him growing up not knowing who you are." Cole closed his eyes, a tremor running through him. "I'd like to meet him," he whispered. Before Megan could respond, a car door slammed in the distance behind him. Loud, sharp. Ranger growled, ears pointed toward the parking lot. Cole turned. A tall man in a Navy suit stood beside a government-marked sedan, scanning the overlook before locking eyes with Cole. He was in his mid-40s, short brown hair slicked neatly back, with a firm jaw and a stern military posture that didn't match the civilian suit. His tie was loose as though he had rushed here, and his expression carried a hardened determination. He was not a tourist. The badge clipped to his belt confirmed it. State Water Enforcement Division. "Mr. Bennett?" the man called out. His tone wasn't friendly. "We need to talk, now." Cole tightened his grip on the phone as Ranger stepped protectively in front of him, teeth bared in a low warning. The man took another step forward. "It's about the water rights claim, and the trouble you've just started." The wind howled across the cliffside. Cole realized this war had only begun. The agent from the State Water Enforcement Division stood rigidly against the ocean wind. His Navy suit tugged at the seams by the salty air. His name was Gavin Stroud, a man in his mid-40s with sharp cheekbones, a square jaw dusted with dark stubble, and eyes the color of gunmetal, steady, uncompromising. His posture carried the imprint of someone who once lived a stricter life, perhaps military, perhaps law, and never fully shed the instinct to stand like a sentinel. He held a leather folder under one arm, as though it were both shield and weapon. Cole didn't move. Ranger positioned himself between the two men, shoulders squared, amber eyes locked onto the stranger. The German shepherd's tail was still, the stance protective but controlled, the kind of discipline only a dog bonded to a veteran could possess. Gavin approached slowly. "You've caused quite a disruption, Mr. Bennett," he said. His voice was low, gravelly, shaped by years of speaking in rooms where every word mattered. "A dormant water claim from 1962 resurfacing now? It has the entire regional board scrambling." Cole didn't waver. If the claim is legitimate, then they shouldn't be scrambling. Gavin's expression didn't shift, but his jaw clenched faintly. Legitimate doesn't always mean convenient. Before Cole could answer, Gavin lifted the leather folder. "I'm not here to shut you down. Not yet. But everything you're touching is politically volatile. Water in Southern California is more valuable than anything you can pull out of the ground." Cole understood the warning beneath the words, but he also sensed something else. Gavin wasn't just a bureaucrat. There was weight behind his voice, the weight of a man who had seen people crushed under systems they didn't understand. "What do you want?" Cole asked. "I want the truth," Gavin replied. "And I want him to make sure no one gets hurt because they dug too deep, literally or legally." Gavin's presence added a new layer of danger, but also a strange sense of possibility. He didn't extend a hand of friendship, but neither did he come as an enemy. He came as something far more unpredictable, a man with power, conscience, and divided loyalties. The conversation ended when Cole's phone buzzed again, Megan's voice breaking through the static of years. "Dad?" she said softly. "Come home when you can. I want to talk." It was the quiet surrender of a long-fought war. From that moment, life began to shift. Months passed, and with them came meetings, presentations, hearings, and legal battles that stretched across county lines. Gavin Stroud appeared at nearly every hearing, not as adversary but as overseer, observing, questioning, and occasionally intervening when the bank pushed too aggressively. His neutral stance frustrated everyone, which told Cole he was doing his job right. Darren Collins fought harder than anyone expected. The transformation was nearly physical. The tension that once tightened his shoulders softened, the guilt that shadowed his blue eyes gradually fading. His sandy blonde hair grew slightly longer, less rigidly styled, as though shedding the corporate mold piece by piece. After the final hearing closed, he dropped a resignation letter on the regional director's desk without a tremor in his hand. Linda Moreno was relentless. Her sharp voice echoed through boardrooms and conference halls, slicing through arguments with the precision of a seasoned litigator who had no patience for corporate greed. The dry Sierra winds tangled her salt and pepper hair during field inspections, but her resolve never wavered. "This," she told the water board during the last hearing, "is not a relic. It's a promise a Marine made to his family, and the law is clear. It belongs to them." Emily Carter sat at every proceeding, her tall frame straight despite the exhaustion lining her features. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back neatly, and though her blue-gray eyes often warmed when she looked at Cole, they were steel during legal proceedings. She had spent a lifetime assuming fate would always take from her. Now she was prepared to defend what little she had left. Mark Carter attended when he could. His frail body improved slowly, small twitches becoming purposeful movements, quiet days becoming more alert ones. He carried a notebook with him, scrawling shaky letters and shapes, attempting to rebuild lost connections. Sometimes, when he looked at Ranger, his smile was clear and strong. Lucy was the orchard's heartbeat. Her drawings of Ranger, Cole, and her grandparents covered the refrigerator, the walls, and Linda's briefcase. Her laughter threaded through every hard moment, like light leaking through clouds. And at the center of everything, Ranger remained steadfast, watching strangers, greeting lawyers, lying under tables during hearings, always guarding the perimeter of the Carter family's fragile new hope. Then, one warm evening, the fight ended. A legally binding agreement was signed recognizing Thomas Hale's perpetual groundwater rights. A sustainable management plan was enacted. Emily retained her orchard, and by selling a controlled portion of the water rights under strict conservation oversight, she gained a stable income stream, one capable of reviving the farm and securing her family's future. Darren joined a community financial fund supporting veterans and small farmers, devoting himself to undoing the mistakes his banking career had left behind. For the first time in years, he laughed freely, full-bodied, unguarded. Gavin Stroud attended the signing, not smiling but nodding once, approval from a man who rarely granted it. "You fought well, Bennett," he said quietly, adjusting the collar of his Navy suit. "Most people don't win battles like this." "Most people don't have Ranger," Cole replied, scratching the dog's ears. Gavin's lips twitched in the faintest suggestion of humor before he disappeared into the sunset glow. Weeks later, Cole returned to Yucca Valley. The desert house waited for him exactly as he left it. Dry winds brushing over the land, sun glaring off the sand, the lonely Joshua trees holding their crooked poses. The cracked foundation where the shed once stood had been cleared. The hatch was reinforced and sealed permanently. The fissure in the ground remained, a thin scar across the earth, a reminder that truth sometimes lived below the surface waiting to be unearthed. Megan arrived the following day. She stepped out of her car looking older than the memory he carried. Her auburn hair pulled into a messy bun, her green eyes weary yet searching, her posture rigid from years of unresolved anger. But when she saw her father standing in the doorway, a man older, softened, humbled, she exhaled a breath she'd been holding for years. Beside her was Owen, a boy of 8 with sandy hair, tanned skin, and cautious curiosity written across his small features. He clutched a baseball glove under one arm. His brown eyes darted between Cole and Ranger with a mixture of nervousness and fascination. Ranger approached first. The German shepherd lowered his head, tail wagging slowly, offering a gesture of peace and invitation. Owen hesitated, then touched the dog's fur. Ranger nudged a baseball toward him with his nose. That was all it took. Cole's throat tightened. Later, on the porch swing, Megan stared at the horizon while Cole brewed coffee inside. The desert dawn spilled gold across the valley. Owen and Ranger played fetch below in the sand, the boys' laughter ringing against the still morning air. Cole handed Megan a warm mug. She accepted it and whispered, "I'm ready to try again, Dad." His chest ached, not with sorrow, but with the long-delayed relief of a wound beginning to close. As the sun climbed, Cole lifted his wrist. A new watch gleamed there, simple, ticking steadily. He no longer wore the frozen one from the bunker. He had let the past rest. This watch was for moving forward. The crack in the earth remained at the far end of the yard. But around it? Life. Laughter. A dog's bark. A grandfather meeting his grandson. Water beneath the valley. And a love no longer buried, flowing again like the mended veins of the desert. The story ended with dawn breaking, the promise of a future carved from truth, sacrifice, and the courage to begin again.